In news just in, the African Union's Peace and Security Council has voted to suspend Sudan from all AU activities until a civilian government has been formed. The council made the announcement after a meeting in AddisAbaba of the member states of the pan-continental body. The decision follows an upsurge in violence in Sudan this week as its ruling military council and opposition groups vie to take charge of the transition to democracy. Joining me in studio now is our foreign correspondent, Sophie Mokoena. Thanks very much for joining us, Sophie. So the African Union really putting pressure on this military council. So where to next?
Well, clearly it's going to be very difficult for the military council because they can't engage anybody or ask assistance from any country on the continent as the continental body has taken this decision to suspend them in all activities. There's no way they can even participate at the AU summit in July in Niger. They can't even consult the AU. The AU has made it clear that they must ensure that they hand over to the civilian rule. We know that on Monday many people were killed when the military decided to go to the streets and try and stop people from protesting. We are told that the toll as we speak stands at 100, and we are told that the number is likely to go up, and therefore this is a catastrophe. And we know that the United Nations Security Council held a meeting on Tuesday. They couldn't agree in terms of the way forward, but clearly the international community is taking a firm action now against Sudan.
In taking this action, isn't there a danger that if these guys are enclosed alone with the Sudanese civilians, public, that they can actually do more damage if they see that they can't, get away with doing what they want to do?
They will, perhaps, but unfortunately it will be very difficult for them. We are likely to see the United Nations and perhaps the AU deploying a peacekeeping mission. And I hope when they do that, they will in fact deploy an intervention force, because you can't just deploy a peacekeeping without giving the mandate to the military that we are deploying there to intervene when there's loss of life. And therefore, I think very soon we'll hear a word from the United Nations Security Council. I am confident that an emergency meeting will be held in New York at the UN headquarters to try and ensure that they really support the African Union on this position.
Where did things go wrong? Because as I recall, the military obviously assisted, took over from Omar al-Bashir, and the civilians were happy, but there was a debate as to how soon there should be a transition to a civilian government. Is that where the problem lay?
I think what has actually led to this is the standoff and the killing of many people on Monday by the military. You know very well that the AU had given the military council 30 days to ensure that they find a solution, and it's almost 60 days. They haven't done that. The most disturbing thing is that the head of the military council on Monday announced the disengagement, which was scary, and all of a sudden people died. And therefore I think this was a good move. People are always complaining that the continental body is reluctant to act when there are crises on the continent, and I think this action speaks to how serious the continent view these issues of human rights violation on the continent. Even though currently we have a problem, Egypt is currently the chair of the AU, and therefore at times it's very difficult to really reach consensus, because when you look at in terms of interest, you'll find that Egypt is being aligned to a particular grouping, and I think that's what has delayed the decision. But finally the Peace and Security Council in Addis this morning taking a decision that enough is enough.
Is this decision also related to sanctions? I mean, will Sudan be able to import goods at all?
I don't think the issue of sanctions have been announced. I think it's engagement, but also I think one thing that they have to ensure is to ensure that the country doesn't have access to military weapons, so that they can't continue to kill people. But the arms embargo will have to be enforced, and therefore I think we'll get better clarity later today. Fortunately, later on, we will be speaking to the South African spokesperson in the Department of International Relations, Clayson Munyela. We'll also speak to the correspondent, our correspondent in AddisAbaba, Coletta Wanjowi, later today, to really get the details of what has been announced and PEP's program of action going forward.
Okay, Sophie, on that note, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much. That was our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena.